I know you are vulgar, snobbish, arrogant, but I can't control my love for you. My heart beats for you, my gaze will always follow you. I give up the rationality of struggle, bend down my knees to submit to you. I am your most loyal captive. Let me be tempted by you and fall into the abyss. Chapter 1. Train. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Watch it. I proudly lifted my chin and pointed my wand at the large freckles on Moses' face, shouting, "Remove the blemishes." The wand emitted a faint purple light, and Moshi quickly picked up the mirror and let out a burst of happy exclamation. Her freckled face had become clean and fair, and Daphne sitting next to her opened her eyes in surprise. This is simply amazing. Moshi couldn't bear to look away from the mirror, her eyes seemed to stick to it. This is something I have just learned, I smiled proudly. My eyes caught a glimpse of small freckles appearing faintly on Moshi's face, and my heart couldn't help but feel anxious. I pretended to be calm and picked up my wand, swung it, and changed Moshi's face back to its original state. Then, I pretended to cough heavily and said before Moshi spoke, "This spell is very laborious and complex. I'm not quite sure yet, the consequences of using it incorrectly can be terrifying. Also, I don't want to be caught dropping out of school," I added. After speaking, I shrugged my shoulders and showed a helpless expression. "Yes, Moses. We're only in first grade and using complex magic is prohibited," Daphne added urgently, as if afraid that I might change my mind and teach Moses. "Being expelled from school and returning home is a great shame for the nobility." Sure enough, Moshi's disappointed expression changed to worry, nervously looking around and stuttering, "Thank you, I won't tell anyone." "But you can have Pansy teach you how to weave spells," Daphne lovingly stroked her thick brown curls. "This is absolutely amazing," Daphne added. "I have to spend 2 hours combing my hair every day, and I'm almost bored." Moshi still couldn't lift her spirits and her eyes were filled with disappointment. If she could remove an astonishing number of freckles from her face, she would be willing to exchange her hair with Daphne for combs or even 5 hours a day, and she let out a long sigh. "Don't worry, Moshi. You are my friend, and when my magic becomes stronger, I will definitely teach you," I said to Moshi in a confident tone, and her eyes lit up with a smile. "Of course." I paused and saw Daphne's eager gaze, slowly saying, "Daphne is also my friend." The two girls across from me instantly showed joyful expressions and looked at me with trusting and admiring eyes, and I enjoyed it to my heart's content. Then I took out the limited edition Magic Fashion magazine that I stole from my mother's room and discussed with them the clothes I already owned in a casual tone. Seeing them burying their heads and reading magazines with relish, I smiled proudly. It was just a small spell that earned the friendship of two foolish people. I curled my lips in disgust, but my joyful mood was somewhat heavy. It's really disappointing not to see a familiar face on the train. If they were here, Alice would be proud to show off her collection of beautiful clothes and jewelry during the summer vacation. Anita would not be willing to pick up the results of her summer Paris show, and when Audrey talked about other aristocratic gossip, everyone immediately shifted from fashion and started chatting. If my arch-nemesis Kate is here, you can still mock her. After the disappearance of the mysterious man who could not be named, many noble families were worried that England would once again fall into chaos and turmoil, and after careful consideration, they would choose either the Busbaton School of Witchcraft and Wizardry or the Demstrong School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Alice, Anita, Audrey, and Kate all choose to go to Busbaton School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. My mother also thinks that returning to France would be a good choice for me to change my arrogant personality or choose to marry a noble family. But the train had already left London, and the loud and clattering noise in the hallway interrupted my thoughts. The chubby witch, pushing the snack cart that had piled up a small hill, opened the private box and asked with a smile, "Darling, do you want to buy any food from the car?" As I frowned and was about to speak, Gregory Gore wrapped a whole big bag of snacks in his typical dull voice. The chubby witch pretended excitedly, looking at us with hopeful eyes, as if as soon as we spoke, she could sell another big bag. I casually glanced at BB Duaway, but it was just snacks like chocolate frog and licorice magic stick that I had grown tired of, and then looked at Gore with disdain. It was exactly the same as when I was a child. When I saw food, I was glued to my eyes. Now I am almost as fat as a pig. I sneered bitterly in my heart. Daphne happily gathered up to the small cart, her fingers quickly sweeping over each food, screaming loudly, and Moshi shyly pointing to what she wanted to eat. The handsome yellow boy standing next to the carriage door lazily selected a few snacks and didn't intend to wait for his companions. He frowned impatiently and pretended to leave. But I reacted quickly and rushed out early, quickly grabbing the hem of the light yellow boy's clothes. Immediately revealing the sweetest smile, I worked hard to make my voice calm and said excitedly, "Draco, hello." Actually, the first sound I made was broken, sharp and unpleasant to listen to. Draco frowned and ignored me, angrily turning his head and leaving. "Draco, what's wrong with you? You don't look very happy." I didn't take Draco's bad attitude to heart, but continued to follow him closely, worried. "Don't bother me, pansy." Draco's pale face showed a blush of anger. "Don't be like a follower, stay away from me." Draco glared at me forcefully as he entered the private room. "Okay, then." I quickened my pace and followed Draco back to his private room, running the friendship that had just brought me joy to my mind and sitting next to Draco. I won't say anything. However, I was thinking to ask Gore what exactly happened. "Can you tell me about Quidditch? You know I've always envied you for playing so well." I smirked at him, trying to please him. Maybe it's Quidditch, maybe it's my persistent questioning, maybe it's because he felt too rude to me just now. Anyway, a proud smile reappeared on his face and he started talking to me with a lively expression on his face. "Forgot to introduce me, I am Pansy Parkinson. The only child from the pure-blooded noble Parkinson's family, and also the oldest and most low-key family. The boy sitting next to me is named Draco Malfoy, the only child of the Malfoy family. Like the Parkinson's family, both are pure-blooded families with a long history. In addition to having noble bloodline, the Malfoy family has prominent wealth and a high political status in the wizarding world. Draco is the reason why I stayed in the UK. If it weren't for Aunt Narcissa's inability to tolerate Draco's distance from the UK, I might have pursued him to the Demstrong School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. I fell in love with him at the first sight. I saw him at a banquet when I was 6 years old, and rushed to embrace him without hesitation. I hugged for a whole day, and it wasn't until the end that Aunt Narcissa advised me for a long time before I let go. Aunt Narcissa always talks about this past with a smile, but every time Draco blushes and yells angrily, and I can only regret not being able to hold on to Draco anymore. In fact, Draco has also been very vigilant and guarded against me since that time. Even though I gradually restrained my behavior and acted like a lady, Draco grew increasingly disliked me. I thought sadly, but in the blink of an eye, it immediately turned into joy. After all, I want to spend 7 years with Draco in Hogwarts. I can be with him every day, first becoming his girlfriend, then becoming the most enviable couple, getting married after graduation, just like Aunt Narcissa and Uncle Lucius, happy. I was intoxicated and lost in my imagination, my thoughts becoming more and more scattered. I didn't pay attention to Draco's speech, and my eyes were eagerly and fervently fixed on Draco, staring blankly without speaking. I accidentally stepped on the opposite person's shoe and couldn't bear to look away. I didn't even turn my head and casually apologized. There was a sudden and cold mocking sound from the opposite side, like a cold sword piercing through the air, and a cold and piercing breath rushed towards me. I instinctively looked up but found only a thin and tall figure left behind. It wasn't Gore or Golb. I turned my head and shrugged nonchalantly. The discomfort in my heart was quickly forgotten, and I looked happily at Draco's handsome profile, which remained unchanged and excited, turning red. However, beautiful time always passes quickly. The sky outside the car window has turned deep purple, and the train has slowed down. Draco's pale face showed a blush, urging me to go out and change my robe. Gore and Gerb also stood up to change their robes, but in fact, I didn't even notice when they came in. I waved goodbye to Draco with a smile and made an appointment to meet in Slytherin later. I come from pure blood and my family is all from Slytherin College. I am extremely certain that I will be assigned to Slytherin. In the next 7 years, I can attend classes and have meals with Draco, and even get married after graduation. Excitedly, I am about to kiss the guide in front of me who looks like a giant monster. With such a joyful and hopeful mood, the rugged mountain road and the constant complaints in Daphne's ears all seemed beautiful. Finally, with the footsteps of a tall black-haired witch wearing an emerald green robe, I arrived at the auditorium of Hogwarts. Chapter 2. Branch. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Thousands of candles floating in mid-air shone brightly on the auditorium, and I secretly looked around at the first-grade students through the singing gap of the branch hat. Watching everyone shrug and pull their shoulders, their tired faces couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief, and a satisfied smile appeared on their faces. Several girls had hair that was fluffy like an angry lion, and one of them had thick brown hair that looked like a huge broom. I lowered my head and tried to suppress my laughter. That's simply great. In the first grade of this year, there was no girl more beautiful than me. I proudly touched my perfect golden long hair with magic on the way, straightened my waist, and worked hard to make my posture as elegant and generous as Aunt Narcissa. Raising his eyes, he collided with a pair of narrow, dark-skinned boy's eyes. He seemed to smile rather than smile, with a hint of mockery and disdain, as if he had watched my previous actions for a long time. It's really rude, don't you know that looking at a lady like this is a despicable behavior? Suppressed the words that rushed out of her mouth, she turned her head with a cold snort and ignored it. I accurately found Draco in the crowd, and his expression was not so excited. His mind seemed to drift for thousands of miles. Draco was staring intently at the little boy with messy black hair, even the excited cheers passing through the 4 long tables did not catch his attention. I curiously tugged at Daphne next to her and pointed to the boy with big glasses, only to find out that it was actually the famous Harry Potter. Harry Potter, the boy who fought back the mysterious man unscathed. The greatest wizard of this century, who was under 1 year old, remains unknown to this day. People talk about him everywhere, grateful for his abilities, and the boy known as the Savior has become the headline of magazines and newspapers, an enduring topic recorded in the history of magic that can be compared to various major historical events. However, for me, with his messy hair, hunched back, and small stature, Harry Potter couldn't even compare to Draco with a single finger, let alone make friends with the Weasley family, who love to deal with dirty mud. I am truly willing to fall, but Draco still stared at Harry Potter with anger and disappointment in his eyes. I pursed my lips and couldn't figure out why Draco cared so much about Harry Potter, especially when I learned from Daphne that the biggest reason Draco was not in a good mood was that Harry Potter was willing to play with Weasley and refused his friendly invitation. However, for me, it has long been a habit to always align with Draco's likes and dislikes. Don't ask why, don't interfere with him, support and encourage him, and be on the same front as him. I silently recited it several times in my heart and nodded firmly. I looked back at Harry Potter with a hint of fanaticism in my eyes, thinking about what gift to give him for Christmas this year. Whoever's name I call now, put on a hat, sit on a stool, and wait for the branch, Professor McGonagall said, holding a parchment roll. Hannah Abbott. I stared at the girl in front of me with 2 golden braids, and it reminded me that the Abbott family seemed to be the most stupid college, the Hitchpatch Academy. I looked contemptuously at her as she indeed rushed towards Hitchpatch College, hoping that she wouldn't attend classes with Hitchpatch in the future. Uncle Lucius said that Hessapatch always delays the progress of classes. If you want to achieve nothing, the best way is to make friends with them. I looked back in disgust, but my gaze collided with the annoying black eyes, as if I could see my thoughts. Anger surged above my head, and it was best not to be assigned to the same college as me, I thought with hatred. Quickly, the number of people in the team gradually decreased. Beside her, Moshi trembled nervously, while Daphne wrinkled her ugly face as if she was about to cry. I looked at them with disdain. It was hard to understand how difficult it would be to be assigned to Slytherin. As for being so nervous. But for a moment, I thought, if the Sorting Hat disliked me, I would be assigned to Gryffindor or Hufflepuff. Kate would mock me all summer, and her mother and father would look disappointed and angry, not to mention those nobles who would repeatedly tell me the outcome of my division at the ball as a joke. In front of me is Theodore Nott, who is already sitting at Slytherin's big table with Draco, smiling at the remaining freshmen. His eyes remained gentle and calm as before, as if entering Slytherin from the branch was as ordinary for him as eating. This just added to my nervousness, as if I heard someone say, that arrogant Parkinson's family has produced a Gryffindor. My mind is in a mess, like a pile of things inexplicably stuffing into my head. Even if there is no gap, it keeps pouring in. This tense emotion is imperceptible even when the branch hat will be placed on my head. Until the Sorting Hat immediately shouted out, "Slytherin," accompanied by a burst of cheers on Slytherin's long table. I breathed a sigh of relief, pretended to be calm, but couldn't control my pace and ran quickly to Slytherin's long table. I happily greeted them and then walked to the first grade seat, sitting next to Draco. Joined the chat happily. I find my nervousness amusing. If assigned to Gryffindor, it proves that the tattered robe should be replaced with a new one. Perhaps the Parkinson's family will be the first to sponsor it. Unconsciously, I drank a lot of soda, and the bubbles inside my body were like constantly expanding balloons, constantly rising up to my chest and throat. My brain was invaded and filled with these slightly sour bubbles, feeling intoxicated and panicked. I wanted to think and try to organize my thoughts. I was assigned to Slytherin, Draco, Moshi, Daphne, and of course, that annoying boy was also assigned to Slytherin. It seemed like his name was Ni, and I struggled to think about the name I just heard. My brain was a bit swollen and painful, and soon I gave up. I was eager to find something to do, whatever it was. With a strange excitement, like inertia, I was immediately attracted by Draco beside me. I eagerly held his favorite dishes on the table. Draco was very happy, with a blush on his pale face and a gleam in his eyes. He took my food, ate it in small bites, and then continued to ask senior students about Quidditch with a curved mouth. I feel a bit bored, continuing to drink soda, as if I can't feel the discomfort in my stomach anymore. Daphne thought I really enjoyed drinking soda and brought me a lot. Even Crabbe stopped eating and looked at me suspiciously, but still handed me the extra soda beside him. I accepted with a smile, and the dishes and cups I finished were quickly collected. I couldn't count how many cups I had drunk. Pansy, stop drinking. Theodore looked at me with concern, then took the soda from my hand, as if afraid that I would continue drinking, so he drank the soda from my glass in one gulp. I was a bit angry, frowning and staring at him. You should be happy, Pansy. We're at Slytherin College. He held my hand and the warmth passed through. Draco is also here, isn't he? His tone was very gentle, as if afraid of startling me. With Theodore's words, my gaze turned to Draco, falling on Gore and Crabbe, Daphne, and Moses, who were buried eating. Then sweep over the Slytherin dining table, Gryffindor, Ravenclaw, and Hufflepuff. Suddenly, my heart surprisingly calmed down. I turned my head and gave Theodore a cunning smile, saying, "It would be very interesting if I were assigned to Gryffindor." Theodore laughed and his voice immediately caught Draco's attention. He showed us a puzzled expression, and Theodore and I smiled at each other, explaining the hypothesis that if we were assigned to another college. Draco was very interested in this topic, so a new round of lively discussions began. The light from the burning candle softened Theodore's plain features, and he smiled gently without further discussion, calmly as if nothing had happened. Seeing this scene, I suddenly felt a bit angry, but I had to admit in my heart that Theodore was really good at understanding people's hearts. Quickly, after finishing their meal, the freshmen returned to the lounge of Slytherin College with the prefect. There are two class leaders, one male and one female, with a green-silver P-shaped badge pinned to their chest. A 5th grade student named Cheryl, the female class leader, is a gentle, elegant, and beautiful girl with beautiful linen curly hair. I really like her voice, with a gentle and reassuring tone, just like Aunt Narcissa coaxing Draco to sleep with her gentle voice. What I prefer is that she comforts us gently and thoughtfully as we pass through the terrifying hallway. Unlike the male head of the class, Corinne, who had a cold and stern face, impatiently urging and occasionally mocking. What a nuisance. I continued to look at Cheryl, thinking to myself that if I were to become a prefect in the future, I would also be as gentle and beautiful as Cheryl, patiently leading the timid and naive 1st grade through the tunnel, repeatedly encouraging everyone with a soft voice. No, I will be better than her, I fantasize about it. The lounge is underground, and it is said to be structurally located below Black Lake. The more we walked, the more pronounced the feeling of dampness and coldness became. The maze-like hallway was empty, and every subtle sound was maximized, creating a chilling sensation. Even with the gentle comfort of the female class chief, there were still some freshmen with pale faces and sobbing sounds. Daphne and Moshi, walking beside me, seemed to be afraid and tightly pressed against my left and right sides. Subconsciously, I held the hands of both of them until the temperature reached the palms, feeling a little more comfortable in my heart. Draco, who was walking ahead, didn't care at all. He quickly found his friends. Gore and Crab, and the 3 of them walked in a row, laughing schadenfreude, as if it was something about Harry Potter being assigned to Gryffindor. Finally, passing through a stone wall, we arrived at the public lounge. The public lounge of Slytherin College is a narrow, low basement, with walls and ceilings cut from rough stones. Round, green lights are chained and hung from the ceiling. Following a year, there were some elderly people who returned to the lounge in groups of 3 or 5, sitting scattered on carved chairs and chatting happily and easily. And in the 1st grade, we couldn't go back to the dormitory yet. We all gathered under a beautifully carved fireplace, and the crackling fire filled the rest room with warmth. The white candles and the light of the fire complemented each other, emitting a soft yellow light on the walls with intricate green patterns. Male-level Chief Corinne stood on the steps and spoke in a cold tone. Slytherin Academy values ambition, power, and strength. Unlike Gryffindor's recklessness and ignorance, Heckpage's stupidity and foolishness, and Ravenclaw's stubbornness and seclusion. Corinne, Cheryl interrupted softly, with a reproach in her eyes. Corinne continued in a colder voice, as pure-blooded beings, you will spend 7 years here in the future, so I advise you not to forget a Slytherin's mission at all times. Pay attention to propriety and assess the situation. You may not follow the rules as long as you are not caught. Never forget to use the things around your neck. Recklessness and ignorance will make your fragile lives vulnerable on the way to glory and strength. After listening, I couldn't help but feel a little scared and a chill that couldn't be expressed clearly in my heart. It was obvious that other freshmen were also trembling with fear from his tone. Daphne was so scared that she shrank away from me, and Moses opened her eyes wide. The freckles on her face seemed to be about to jump out. But Draco's eyes were filled with excitement, and his gaze at Corinne was mixed with some admiration. Fortunately, the gentle Cheryl showed us a warm smile after Corinne left, and then added some precautions such as stairs and class. Perhaps seeing the fatigue on our faces, they didn't say for a while before letting us rest. Moshi couldn't open her eyes wearily, Daphne looked like a deflated ball wilting, and I was also exhausted and almost collapsed to the ground immediately. Fortunately, our room is only 2 corners away from the lounge and it's only 10 meters away. When we pushed open the door, we saw 4 beds with curtains hanging from them, with dark green flannel curtains and silver tassels at each corner. The interior wall of the room is adorned with light green wallpaper, different from the rough stone walls of the lounge. It features a beautiful wizard holding his wand in an elegant posture, and each person's luggage has already been delivered. Me, Moshi, and Daphne are 3 people, who else? When there was a positive question, it was quickly answered again. Hello, A low and unpleasant voice came from behind. Chapter 3. Anna Brown. You are listening at novelfull.audio. We looked back together and saw a short girl with red hair wearing an old fried dough twists braid and huge black frame glasses. She was wearing an old gown with several ugly patches, and her dirty mouth was stained with sticky mayonnaise. Many years later, I often wondered whether someone with exquisite clothing and elegant behavior and the ugly and lowly mud in front of me were the same person. I also began to understand how a person's jealousy can be so terrifying, constantly growing, and ultimately possessing the power to destroy everything. As an adult, I was avenged by her for the insult she had suffered in Slytherin, losing the most important person in my life, and losing all the happiness and joy I should have. Unfortunately, as a child, I couldn't perceive the regret and self-blame of adulthood. I still liked to bully people who were weaker than me, and enjoying their pain. Unfortunately, Anna became my first entertainment activity tonight, especially at such a happy moment. It's disgusting. I let out an exaggerated scream, with a look of disgust in my eyes, and immediately took a dozen steps back. Are you a pig? I said maliciously, and Moshi and Daphne laughed heartily. Hurry up and go back to your pigsty, I said with a sharp smile, covering my nose. You seem to have violated your dignity, and the dirty girl looks at us with flames in her eyes. Yeah, look at her wearing muggle shoes, tattered and tattered, Daphne sarcastically remarked. I really don't know if the hat sorting house is broken. People like her who are disgusting and dirty should go collect the monster heck page, Daphne said with even more excitement as she swept away her previous lack of energy. Moshi hesitated to speak, feeling flustered. I pulled an exaggerated smile as I watched the short man with a low head turn increasingly red, and his fist clenched tighter. It's really enjoyable. The previous fatigue disappeared all at once, and I'm not worried about what trouble it might cause. No wizarding family would be so destitute as to make their children dress so ugly in Hogwarts, except for the Weasley family. My eyes glanced at the chest badge on the dirty robe, which read Anna Brown, plain and ordinary, like a mud-like name. I didn't expect the hat sorting house to assign her to Slytherin. I smiled coldly and then stared closely at every part of her, coming up with one mockable word after another. Shut up. The sound was like a rough white paper cutting, and Anna suddenly lifted her wand with force and aimed it at Daphne. Daphne's mouth widened in fear, and Moses covered it in surprise. A green light rushed out and was about to hit Daphne. She let out a duck-like scream, then a white light blocked the green light and emitted a small, silver-white smoke, quickly turning towards Anna. She fell to the ground and fell into a coma. It's really foolish, attacking others requires practicing the spell at least a few times, I sneered and put away my wand. Pansy, Daphne exclaimed excitedly, hugging me tightly. You're really amazing, she let go of her arm and looked at me with envy in her eyes. She should be okay, isn't she? Moshi asked hesitantly, as if thinking of something terrifying, his voice trembling. It's just a simple coma spell, it won't last much time, I said impatiently, feeling a bit displeased that Moshi didn't admire me like Daphne did. If you are found using a spell, you will be expelled, said Moses nervously. If my mother knew, she would definitely let me move out of Lisa's room, and my father would scold me to death. Moshi showed a frightened expression and began to mutter. Moshi was very afraid of being fired, and on the train, when he heard the word fired, his whole body stiffened and he remained motionless, and his speech trembled. According to her mother, Moses was the only one among the 4 children of the Miller family to receive a Hogwarts school notice. She was not originally favored and immediately became the family's hope. After all, 3 squibs in a famous pure-blood family are talked about by people. If she is dropped out of school and goes home, she will soon fall back to her original position. In addition, her brothers and sisters are more jealous of her, which is unimaginable. Sure enough, Moshi's face turned a bit pale. All right, Moses. Pansy is really amazing, haven't you seen her on the train? Daphne said, worried that Daphne's words would remind Moshi of the spell to eliminate freckles. She pestered me to teach her. I quickly picked up my hand and pretended to take a breath, waving my hand and saying I wanted to sleep. The so-called curse of eliminating freckles is just a visual confusion curse, and it cannot be persisted for long, which has nothing to do with the strength of the magic. Even if she kept it from Moshi, she wouldn't have noticed anyway. After searching through all the beauty books, she couldn't find a spell that could permanently eliminate freckles. She could only hope for it on me. I thought more and more proudly, if I don't behave well and become my little follower then. Sure enough, a hint of disappointment flashed in Moshi's eyes. Climbing onto the bed dejected, without saying anything more. Daphne saw that I was no longer interested in talking and climbed onto the bed in frustration. After a farce just now, we were all exhausted. After changing into pajamas, we all fell asleep. Anna, who didn't remember lying on the cold floor, fell into a sweet sleep. The next morning, when I woke up, Brown's figure was no longer on the floor, and the bed was empty, neatly as if it had not been touched. I curled my lips and didn't take it seriously. Turning her head to look at the other two beds. Mosi tightly closed her eyes, clutching the blanket with both hands, like a frightened little mouse. Daphne slept unsteadily, drooling at the corners of her mouth and giggling foolishly. I picked up the silver clock and saw that there were 30 minutes left until the pointer pointed to Draco for breakfast. I was so surprised that I immediately got up. This was my first day of school with Draco, and I foolishly wasted time sleeping. I slapped my forehead in frustration. Find the floating comb, quickly say, straight, and the comb will hang in mid-air and automatically comb my golden hair. Finally, I selected a dark green silk headband and tied my smooth golden long hair together, tying it in a beautiful bow. I stood in front of the mirror, looking discontentedly at the black wizard robe I was wearing and pulling in disgust. It's really ugly. Hogwarts school uniform is too ugly, unlike the exquisite silk uniform of Busbaton School. I pouted in dissatisfaction. Hi, you've been shining long enough, haven't you? The mirror suddenly spoke. Ha ha ha, ha ha ha, like a narcissistic Narcissus. Be careful not to fall into the lake. No, you already live under the lake. The mirror began to mock sarcastically. Seeing my dissatisfied expression, he immediately added, okay, be happy. You're the best-looking first-grade student I've ever seen wearing this. That's for sure. I proudly lifted my head and looked at the girl in the mirror. The eyes are as blue as a clear sky, with thick curled eyelashes like butterfly wings, fair skin, and a pale pink blush with a baby's chubby face. A cute little pear vortex playfully appears at the corner of the mouth when smiling. Exquisitely beautiful like a porcelain doll. I smiled with satisfaction. Although the clothes looked ugly, it was still tolerable to see Draco every day. I silently advised myself in my heart. But you're too old, aren't you? I looked at the scattered rust spots on the silver-framed mirror and said disgustedly, next time I'll bring the mirror from home, at least. I won't speak recklessly, I quickly added, and sure enough, the mirror made an angry, cluck sound. I ignored it and immediately picked up my backpack and left. There are a total of 142 stairs in Hogwarts, which are wide and large, some small and narrow, and wobbly. Fortunately, Slytherin is not far from the cafeteria in the basement, but I still got lost. Even though I walked through the corridor last night, I still don't like that dark, damp corridor. I walked through the corridor and left the dungeon, climbed the marble stairs, and finally arrived at the auditorium. Moses and Daphne arrived at the cafeteria with me at the same time, but their hair was messy, the wizard robe was wrinkled and unsightly. Daphne's face was almost covered by her swollen hair, and they stood at the entrance of the auditorium ignoring more and more inquiries from them, smiling like fools and greeting me. Merlin's beard, do they never look in the mirror? It's really impolite. I frowned and recited the spells straight and clean up to them respectively. Until they looked better, I lifted my head and proudly walked into the cafeteria, like the last guest to appear at a ball. Moshi and Daphne seemed to feel my presence, forgetting their embarrassment earlier and standing up close to me. Chapter 4. Confrontation. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. When I arrived at Slytherin's dining table, besides a sumptuous breakfast, it was also piled with packages of all sizes. Gore's mouth was full, and his bulky head shook repeatedly, his eyes still searching for food. Draco, who was sitting next to him, saw me coming and continued the conversation with a long voice, but still automatically moved some seats aside for me to sit down. Draco didn't notice my careful attire, but he turned his head and said, "Good morning, Pansy." "Good morning, Draco." I put on the perfect smile. "This is the package Mom gave you, it should be candy like me," Draco said as he pushed the package in front of me. "Aunt Narcissa also gave me candy." I spoke with an uncontrollable surprise. Aunt Narcissa's candy is really delicious, but unfortunately, her mother thought that eating candy would affect the image of a lady. So every time I go to Malfoy Manor, I have to stuff my mouth full, and sometimes even compete with Draco for his favorite green apple-flavored candy. I don't know what Aunt Narcissa will make this time. I curiously opened the package. Draco didn't want to continue the conversation and turned his head to Theodore to continue the conversation, as if it was some Quidditch. Apart from Aunt Narcissa's gift, I only received one letter from my grandfather sent from France. My mother said that my grandfather was sick, so I returned to France before the start of school. In fact, this time my father made my mother angry again. After every argument between my father and mother, my mother would become angry and fabricate false news about my grandfather's serious illness before returning to her hometown in France. When I was a child, I believed it to be true and was heartbroken. I cried and clamored to go see my dear grandfather with my mother, and also brought the expensive potion I had saved up for a long time to buy to restore my health. As a result, I saw my grandfather, who was as happy as a mischievous child, riding a flying broomstick and performing difficult movements, but I was frightened. I thought my grandfather went crazy even after he became seriously ill, so he suddenly fell ill for several weeks. My grandfather knew he was being targeted and made his granddaughter worried about her serious illness. I was so angry that I drove my mother back to England and scolded my father. However, when my mother and father argue now, she still likes to use the excuse that my grandfather is sick to force him to bring her back from France. My grandfather always writes a sincere letter to me, telling me that he is in good health and can play Quidditch with his students. So on the first day of school, my dear father and mother were busy dealing with their disputes and didn't remember to write to me. Of course, Alice and the others must be busy meeting new classmates and deeply immersed in the charm of the new school. I pouted and swore that if they didn't write to me yet, they would never prepare gifts for them during Christmas. I picked a transparent green candy and patiently listened to Draco's speech while stirring the cereal with a spoon and tilting my head. Sometimes I can't understand why Draco likes to talk about Quidditch so much. I heard that Quidditch will select candidates in the future, and Draco will definitely be selected. But I don't like flying around on a broomstick at all. The situation from high altitude is too terrifying. My thoughts became increasingly scattered, and I thought about which row Draco would sit in during the transformation class and who he wanted to group up with during the potion class. My face turned pale as I thought of the scene where the magic medicine department would process frog mucus. Suddenly, the arm stirring the cereal was kicked by someone next to me, and the whole plate was thrown over my brand new robe. I screamed in panic, and the senior students on Slytherin's table looked at me in unison with the screams. And for all of this, I didn't pay attention. I only knew that my beautiful robe was destroyed on the first day of school, and I glared angrily at the person who hit me, only to find out that it was the impolite and bad-looking boy from yesterday. Unexpectedly, he just said a faint apology and then ignored it and left the auditorium. His actions made me even more angry, wanting to pick up the cereal in front of me and pour it onto him. Pansy, Bresson probably didn't mean it. Theodore and Draco noticed the commotion and stopped talking, persuading Theodore gently. "What's wrong?" I'm sitting so far away from him, he deliberately knocked over my cereal. I turned my head and shouted angrily at Millicent. I must make him pay the price. I stared fiercely at the figure walking away. Pansy, can you keep your voice down? Draco turned around, his pale face turning angry red. Yes, Pansy, quickly put down the plate, the professors have noticed. Moshi pulled my robe and whispered in my ear. Sure enough, Professor Snape frowned at me as if he was annoyed by my noise. Even the female teacher in an emerald green robe sitting in the front row of the hall immediately cast a reproachful glance at me. I just sat down in a huff. Snow Pear gave me a clean-up, and went back to the senior dining room with a soft voice of comfort. In the blink of an eye, the senior students at Slytherin's dining table continued to chat and laugh, eating breakfast as if nothing had happened. I snorted coldly and labeled Bresson as Kate number 2 in my heart. And Kate, who is the most disliked person in my history, is now equally disliked by Bresson as Kate. I sat down again and picked up the bread to eat, and my mood slowly calmed down. After a while, Theodore and I chatted even happier. He was really amazing, and in less than a night, we knew how many nobles were in Slytherin. Surprisingly, there is even Muggle in the first grade. As soon as I looked up, I saw Anna Brown burying her head and constantly stuffing things into her mouth bulging like a sticky and ugly frog. I cracked my mouth and touched Theodore's arm, just like her. Theodore followed my gaze and smiled gently, saying in a helpless tone, I'm not sure. I am not very satisfied with this answer, nor am I satisfied with Theodore's ambiguous attitude. Just like his father in the Ministry of Magic, he is independent, smooth, and never expresses any opinions. I remember when I was a child, I liked to direct others to climb trees and help me get the greenest leaves, or I liked to dance with Draco to make nobles from lower backgrounds wear funny clothes. Whenever I see their shy and fearful expressions, I always burst out laughing, while Theodore frowns like a worried little old man. I know he doesn't like to join us. I also complain to Draco that Theodore is always like a piece of wood, not knowing how to get happiness from it. But Draco doesn't care. In fact, Theodore is Draco's true friend. Sometimes I feel wonderful that Draco and I were able to have breakfast together at Hogwarts School from the age of 6 until now. There are so many differences between me and him. Just like Draco doesn't recognize my social circle, I also can't understand his social circle, but many years of tacit understanding always create an unbreakable connection between us in each other's social circle. Draco still pulls me and Alice, the girls who don't like Quidditch, to play Quidditch. I attend the ball, and Draco and Theodore, no matter how unwilling they are, will wear the most gorgeous wizard robes to attend. Perhaps recalling past events made my mood better, and I quickly forgot about the unpleasant experience just now. Chapter 5. Under Confrontation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After breakfast, Daphne, Moshi, and I went to the deformation classroom on the first floor of the castle with our textbooks. Everyone has their own separate table, and I sit in the second row near the door. Draco is diagonally opposite me, and next to him are Gore and Crabbe. Theodore's thin and weak body is now blocked by Gore and Crabbe and cannot be seen. Daphne and Moshi sit in the last row of me. And by my side, it was Bryce Zabini, who deliberately dirted my robe. The one who came to class was Professor McGonagall, who was leading us on the campus hat. She was very serious, with all her hair curled back into a bun. With a stern face, she turned her desk into a pig and then back again. Everyone was attracted and wished to study immediately. But soon we understood that turning furniture into animals would take a long time. So Professor McGonagall asked us to take a bunch of complex and difficult notes, and then gave each person a match to try and turn it into a needle. In fact, I put in a lot of effort, and the match still didn't change at all, but at least it turned into a green match with fluorescence. It seems that Miss Parkinson will succeed soon, Zabini sneered. Changing the color of the match's appearance is such a creative magic. Then he gently waved his wand, muttering words, and smoothly turned the match into a needle. He squinted his narrow eyes, tilted his body towards me, and a faint sneer curved from the corner of his mouth. Professor McGonagall noticed this scene and asked Zabini to demonstrate how a match can turn into a silver glittering needle, with a pointed end that showed a rare smile. However, when I saw my shining green match, my eyebrows furrowed and he whispered to me to watch the spell cast a few more times. He showed a half smile, with a strong satire on his face. His chin and narrow eyes couldn't hide his disdain and ridicule towards me. How dare he be so rude? I looked at him angrily, clutching my wand tightly and gritting my teeth. I swear, if it weren't for Professor McGonagall, I would have thrown countless sleep spells at him. From the morning serial kanji to the present sarcasm, this Zabini keeps causing me trouble, and this feeling is as disgusting as the first time I tasted the taste of nose excrement. I tried to suppress my anger and planned to go back to the lounge to deal with him, then ignore him and continue to look down at my notes, comparing the order of the spells I just recited. If Miss Parkinson, who is proud, requests me, I would be happy to help her achieve that near success, Zabini whispered, his eyes filled with sincerity and a hint of undisguised ridicule. In an instant, I suddenly didn't feel so angry. Do you like me? I smiled and turned my head, looking straight at him. He opened his mouth in shock, as if confused by the question. Seeing his suddenly red ears, I curled my lips and continued, you remind me of Essen. He's very similar to you, always looking for opportunities to talk to me. Unfortunately, I don't like him always following behind me, so I gave him a special greeting. Even now, he's scared when he sees me. I curled my lips and said slowly. And you, I neither know nor have I spoken to you, always do things that disgust me. Compared to growing up with Ethan, I would take you so special seriously. He suddenly became very silent, bowing his head and not knowing what he was thinking. It was just after class, and I was too lazy to watch his reaction. After finishing speaking, I packed my notes and books and left. I didn't see him appear until dinner that night. But I didn't care at all because the owl brought letters from Alice, Anita, and Audrey. I was extremely happy and immediately ran back to the lounge with the envelope, finding an empty place to read carefully. Chapter 6. Injury. You are listening at novelfull.audio. It was dinner time, and everyone went to the auditorium for dinner. The rest room was empty, and a pile of fire was burning under the fireplace, making a crackling sound. The warm glow of the fire reflected the exquisite carved seats. I didn't pay attention to these and sat casually in a chair, eagerly opening the fire stamp on the envelope. Before I could even catch a first glance, the letter in my hand was suddenly snatched away by someone. I looked up angrily and found out that it was Zabini holding my envelope. Give it back to me, I shouted angrily at him and then rushed towards him to retrieve my letter, but he was too tall. He stretched his arm and lifted the envelope to the other side. Why are you so anxious? I almost suspect that the person in the transformation class is not the same as you now. He let out a short sneer, with a malicious smile at the corner of his mouth. If you are very angry and want to fight, we can change the time, but now my envelope is important, you must return it to me immediately. I increased my volume and kept trying to get closer to grab the envelope. No, didn't you say I liked you? So how could I get angry? I just wanted to see the content of the letter that made you so eager to get it back. Zabini kept retreating, his hands rising higher and higher above his head. I was too tired to touch the envelope with my hands, so I had to stop and stare at him. I know you hate me, your behavior and attitude show me your disgust. So you know, but you lied. At least I respected you before, but the way you stole my envelope and threatened me was really disgusting. He squinted his narrow eyes and pursed his mouth tightly. Suddenly, he showed a smile, then jumped back and started reading the contents of the letter loudly. Then, he began to mock and said every sentence in a coquettish tone. Every word he said insulted Alice and her blessings, and he had no right to touch that envelope. I have never wanted to kill someone so much in my life, like a cat pouncing on a mouse. Taking advantage of his unpreparedness, I used all my strength to jump forward and knock him down. I succeeded. But before I could enjoy the joy of success, the paper fell to the ground and suddenly drifted towards the fire, the flames devouring the letter. No, I exclaimed in panic. It was unbelievable that Zabini directly reached into the fire, picked up the envelope, and quickly extinguished the flames with his robe. 1/3 of the letter had already been burned, and his face suddenly turned pale. He hesitated and handed the envelope to me. The fingers I handed over were red and swollen, appearing somewhat ferocious. I was stunned and murmured softly, "You actually used your hands to pick them up. Why is that? Shouldn't I say I'll take you to the medical room now?" He showed a fragile smile, a smile without malice or ridicule that I had never seen before. His behavior makes me feel uncomfortable. If he hates me, we should stay in the enemy's position. I hate him and then find a suitable opportunity to cast a spell on him. It's really not possible. Draco will help me use Quidditch to retaliate against him, and in the end, he will reluctantly bow down and apologize, afraid of every appearance of us. Shouldn't it be like this? But why do I feel a sense of guilt? He snatched the envelope, otherwise it wouldn't have caught fire, let alone using a contemptuous tone to mock my friendship. He should be annoying. My mind is in chaos, and I still don't understand this complex emotion. On the way back from the medical hospital, Zabini said slowly, "Your way of not speaking is a bit scary to me. What are you afraid of? I would rather you mock me and say harsh things like you did in the deformation class. I'm not used to your behavior. You're so strange, it's like you've known me for a long time. Few people say that to me anymore." I laughed and didn't mind what he said. Perhaps we have known each other for a long time, but we have forgotten. The stairs suddenly changed direction and made an unpleasant sound. I couldn't hear what he was saying clearly. "What are you talking about?" "It's nothing, but tomorrow is a potion class, you have to sit with me." "Why?" He shook his hand wrapped in bandages before my eyes and looked at me helplessly. "But if you don't steal my envelope, you won't do this anymore." "Sorry, what?" "I shouldn't have snatched your envelope, read your letter in that tone, or let your letter be burned." He stopped and walked in the dark underground corridor. His gaze was sincere but also nervous, carefully looking at my face. His behavior puzzled me. "Are you apologizing for what you did before?" "Yes, I don't understand your purpose in doing these things, because I want to make friends with you. But I got the wrong method." "Friend? Isn't it enough for Draco and Theodore to be your friends? You dirted my robe at breakfast, but they're on your side. Okay, in order to gain your forgiveness and make up for my mistake, I may need to do a lot of things." Zabini smiled at me. I was a bit uncomfortable with his friendly demeanor and said awkwardly, "I didn't say I wanted to be friends with you, but I could be your partner in potion class." Then I quickened my pace, left Zabini, and quickly shouted the command to enter the lounge. The rest room was already scattered with some people, and Draco, the first-grade students, also crowded in front of the fire to join the discussions of the senior students. I still held the letter sent by Alice in my hand. I smiled and refused Daphne's invitation to join the chat, excitedly running into the lounge to read. Chapter 7. Busy Life. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The potion class is taught in an underground classroom, with glass jars placed along the wall. The animal specimens soaked inside are trembling, and the professor is Professor Snape, the dean of our Slytherin college. When he picked up the roster in class and read Harry Potter, he paused and announced to everyone in a sarcastic tone how ridiculous Harry Potter's existence was. Draco, Crabbe, and Gore chuckled with their hands covering their mouths. As I watched Harry Potter struggling to answer the question, my chin lifted high and I proudly curled my lips. As Professor Snape once said, fame does not represent everything. Harry Potter has been a highly talked about figure since he entered school, with people discussing him at the dinner table, in class, and even in the bathroom. Even students at Slytherin College in Gryffindor who disdain it will stare at Harry Potter and whisper. As soon as Harry Potter appears, everyone will stop the original discussion and start a bunch of topics around him. If he accidentally reveals his lightning scars again, everyone can't help but want to get closer and see. Draco, on the other hand, believes that Harry Potter is not worth so much attention and gets tired of every sudden shift in the topic to the so-called savior. So when Professor Snape saw through and proved that Harry Potter was just a facade, Draco swept away his previously depressed mood and laughed until his mouth cracked open. But happy times are always brief. When I truly touched the dry nettle and shattered the venomous teeth of the snake with my hands, my mood sank to the bottom of the valley, shouting in my heart why I had to touch such disgusting things. Before the start of the school year, Draco was eagerly anticipating the potion class and kept writing letters to Professor Snape inquiring about issues with pot pharmaceuticals. Uncle Lucius specially built a potion laboratory for him at Malfoy Manor, and he even spent more time on potions than Quidditch throughout the summer vacation. I also sneaked in with Anita to look, but was scared by the mouse tail and frog eyes inside the glass bottle, and ran out. For a week, I had not visited the Malfoy estate again, as if there was still a sticky and damp smell from the laboratory on my body. Follow the steps and lift the crucible from the top of the fire. Endure the nausea again and then add porcupine thorns. Next is Zabini, who is constantly stirring the liquid in the crucible against the textbook. Draco is still wondering why today I am working with Zabini, who had a dispute yesterday, when we agreed to take potion classes together before the start of school. But it doesn't matter who he works with, he has already done the potion for treating boils, so he pulled Gore to the table and eagerly operated it. Theodore looked at Bresson Zabini's slightly pale fingers as he removed the bandage, but smiled and didn't speak, pulling Crabbe together to work together. Daphne and Moshi were even more surprised by the friendly atmosphere between me and Zabini. The incident that happened in the lounge last night became our default secret, so we unanimously promoted it to the outside world. It was just a coincidence that we were grouped together. But smelling a strange smell on his hands and accidentally getting a red mark from a porcupine prick, he angrily demanded that Bresson Zabini handle the medicinal herbs in his future potion class and I will stir them. He showed a cunning gaze and nodded happily. On Tuesday, I will climb to a tall building and watch the stars in the cold wind, learning the trajectories of different stars and planets. 3 days a week, I have to stay in a dirty greenhouse with Professor Sprout to learn how to cultivate strange plants and colonies, as well as attend intense transformation and spell classes. Turning matches into needles, turning teapots into mice, and making feathers fly are not my favorites. I recited dry and uninteresting spells, losing patience bit by bit. Merlin's beard, what's the use of turning a match into a needle? Bresson Zabini, on the other hand, learns very quickly. He usually teases me first and then teaches me, but his harshness is still a bit annoying. But with his help, the transformation and spell classes were actually the courses that I completed my homework the fastest. Not to mention the sticky potion class, Professor Quirrell of the human-shaped skunk. If we ignore the monotonous Professor Binns, then the most free class is the history of magic. At least I can bring out the fashion magazine and discuss with Moshi and Daphne what to wear tomorrow. Sometimes I suspect that Draco and I are not attending the same school, and our time together is particularly limited. During the first week of school, Draco was glued together with Millicent, Gore, and Crabbe, and homework was done during and after class. They quickly integrated into Hogwarts and attended gatherings that I didn't even know about, the most despicable of which was limited to male wizards. I heard it was held by the prefect Corinne. The activities at Slytherin College are pitifully scarce, and there are no dances or operas as Aunt Narcissa mentioned. First-grade female freshmen can only participate in Shirley's afternoon tea. I have to listen to Shirley talk about the key points of learning in each subject. It's really boring. The most unbearable thing is that I have to listen obediently, do a good job of serving tea, pouring water, and delivering desserts. I regret that Cheryl is already as serious and old-fashioned as Professor McGonagall at such a young age. But what's interesting is that my third-grade senior Catherine quietly told me a lot of gossip. She's just like another Audrey. Audrey has a book that records gossip, and she believes that the evaluation of people often starts from the ears, and the truth is not important. Understanding all evaluations of others is more helpful in making judgments about oneself. She always knows everything she wants to know. But she never shows each of us her books, even though she answers whenever we ask her. Cheryl and Corinne were once in a romantic relationship. Poor Corinne, his angel only fell in love with Ravenclaw's bookworm, the third-grade senior told me with a mysterious expression on her face. The next day when I had breakfast, she specifically pointed me at the boy. He is a handsome and upright boy who was chatting with another boy at the time. Although he is not as strong as Corinne, his smile is very approachable. He noticed that we were observing him and he didn't get angry, but instead smiled gently. To a large extent, doing homework and participating in Cheryl's club every day is already enough for me to be busy. Compared to Alice and the others, their lives at Busbaton School are truly colorful. Living in a warm and comfortable dormitory, wearing exquisite silk dresses that sparkle like diamonds whenever the hem swings. There are also courses that make me jealous. They have various clubs. There will be a dance party every Wednesday, during which girls will wear their own clothes and dance with their dance partners all night. They also sent photos of their weekend trip to the Pyrenees, snuggling intimately, wearing beautiful dresses and waving brightly with smiles. At the end of the letter, they said they really wanted to know how I had been at Hogwarts. There are no fun clubs, no beautiful school uniforms, no interesting courses, no familiar friends, no beautiful dormitories. Every night, I can list 100 reasons why I don't like Hogwarts. I tried to find something more fun to reply to, but I was too rushed during the day and had to seize the limited time to complete my paper. Even Brown, the only one who can relieve boredom, doesn't know where to go to sleep every night. The most despicable thing is that Draco didn't notice my emotions, but I haven't spoken to him for 5 days. Is it like Aunt Narcissa said that boys are not as sensitive to emotional changes as girls? But Draco could even see Gore's unhappiness in missing one chicken leg. Why didn't you see that I was unhappy? Am I not even important to Gower? Am I just so transparent? Am I just that unimportant? Feeling too uncomfortable in my heart, I rolled over and continued to think about these questions. Accompanied by Daphne's occasional murmurs and the heavy workload during the day, I slowly closed my eyes. It's too annoying. Yes, I'll just go ask Draco earlier tomorrow. After thinking about it, I finally fell asleep with peace of mind. Chapter 8. Deadlock. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The next day, I woke up very early and as soon as I left the room, I saw Draco and the others sitting on the long sofa in front of the fire, seemingly discussing something fiercely. Crabbe and Gore sat around Draco, standing in front of the fire. His pale face was flushed, his eyes shining brightly, and the reflection of the fire in front of the fireplace made him look a bit eerie. He kept gesturing with his hands, sometimes gripping his chest and leaning backwards, sometimes raising his head high. Seeing his movements, I immediately understood that he was talking about his Quidditch again, and now his arm makes an extended movement, which is probably about his successful evasion of the plane. No, I carefully observed that Theodore's smile was bitter and not as indifferent as usual. Is it that Draco is not simply telling but planning to invite Theodore to participate in Quidditch? It is well known that Theodore does not like Quidditch, but why do Gore and Crabbe also have a sad expression on their faces? The first person to notice me standing there was Theodore, with a rescued expression and a slightly relaxed smile. He said there was a notice posted in Slytherin's public lounge, stating whether to start flying classes on Thursday or with Gryffindor students. Slytherin students only attend potion classes with Gryffindor, and the famous Mr. Harry Potter's outstanding performance in class is still Slytherin's talk to this day. Of course, this is not without Draco's promotion. Draco and his team always regret not being able to see more embarrassing moments about Potter. Especially if he can defeat Harry Potter in flying classes, he will become a legendary figure among the first-year students of Slytherin. Draco complains every day that first-year students are not eligible to join the college Quidditch team. He has been looking forward to flying classes for a long time, and he is determined to make Harry Potter look bad again. But I don't care about flying classes at all, nor do I care about the Savior. I've had enough of Draco talking about Quidditch all the time, except for the topic of Quidditch. He hasn't said a few words to me since the start of school. We didn't do homework together, we didn't sit in class together, and even Draco enjoyed talking to his new acquaintance Bresson about mocking Harry Potter. I have a question in my heart: what exactly is my relationship with Draco like? I remember the last gathering before the start of school, which was held in the garden of Malfoy Manor. The attendees were all aristocratic children who had known each other since childhood. At that time, I was watching Draco giggle around the center when Audrey suddenly uttered a sentence. She said, "Pansy, you're such a pitiful person." "Ollie. You're hurting me." I widened my eyes, filled with anger and injustice. "I really don't understand why you went to Hogwarts with Draco and abandoned us." My mood suddenly softened. It turned out that Audrey still couldn't accept the fact that I wanted to separate from them. I looked at her with love and wanted to comfort her, but the next words made me want to take out my wand and duel with her. "For Draco, what is the difference between you and Gore and Crabbe?" Audrey added, "Are you sure that going to Hogwarts can change your relationship with him?" "Yes, I have much less time to talk to Draco at Hogwarts school than before. I am still just an ordinary friend of Draco, a friend who immediately forgets when he encounters something new." At that time, I strongly denied and vowed that I would become the most popular couple at Hogwarts school with Draco. But now, I have been standing here for so long, and Draco is still immersed in Quidditch and his new friends. Should I abandon the reserved demeanor of a lady and ask him directly, "Hey Draco, what do you think about our relationship? Am I someone important to you? Am I your girlfriend?" If his answer to me is negative, how should I continue to get along with him? My mind is even more chaotic than last night, and a terrible conjecture has emerged. I chose to go to Hogwarts school wrong, and Audrey was right. Draco noticed me and greeted me to go to the auditorium with him for breakfast. Suddenly, I don't want to see his face again, I don't want to pay attention to him anymore. I want to prove that Audrey is wrong. Draco will prove to me that our relationship is important, more important than Gore and Crabbe, and more important than Theodore. I just need to give him a signal, just like every time my mother needs my father to apologize, she will release the signal to give him a buffer time, so that he can understand and examine our relationship. I ignored Draco's stunned expression and hesitant speech. I held my head high, looked ahead, suppressed the urge to communicate, and quickly walked out of the lounge. My heart beats fast, and I swear Draco has never encountered such indifference from me towards him. Until the flight class, Moshi, Daphne, and I were far away from Draco and his group. Daphne happily chattered around me because I promised to call her a new braided spell, ignoring the broom beside her. Moshi couldn't help but ask what happened to Draco and me, so she focused all her attention on her broom. Unfortunately, the broom was like a stone pillar at Hogwarts school, without any movement. Draco didn't notice my emotions, he actually told Theodore that I was unhappy because I had to take flight classes. He was particularly excited, even though Ms. Huichi had repeatedly corrected his grip, he never put down the broom. But when he saw Harry Potter mastering the broomstick faster than him, he remained calm and stared at the praised Harry Potter with his eyes fixed on him. Then he showed a familiar smile to me, pulling Gore and Crabbe down and whispering something, as if planning something. I have nothing to do with his plan. I am very angry now. Why hasn't he noticed my abnormality so far? Did he not receive my signal? Or does he think I don't have any emotions from the beginning? My self-esteem was greatly damaged, and my restlessness and depression could no longer be suppressed. I kicked the broom next to me hard with my foot. As a result, I kicked Bresson Zabini's broom. Bresson Zabini curled his lips and looked at me with a smile on his face, slowly speaking, "Miss Parkinson, poor brooms cannot respond to your anger." I turned my head and glared at him fiercely. "So are you going to act as an envoy of justice now?" I asked sharply. "My pleasure." Branson Zabini stopped with just one answer and naturally turned to discuss other things with Theodore. The argument came to an abrupt end like this, and I became even angrier. There were still many counterattacks in my stomach that I didn't say. As a result, Bresson Zabini ended the debate with just a casual remark. The anger accumulated from Draco's lack of response and Bresson Zabini's mockery left me only able to shout out the broom in anger. But seeing Longbottom being thrown away by the broom, my mood improved a bit. Even a bit regretful, the happiness ended so quickly. After Miss Witchy left with the injured Longbottom, Draco suddenly burst out laughing and mocked Neville Longbottom. Other Slytherin students will not give up the opportunity to mock Gryffindor students, following Draco's words closely. I understand that Draco's plan has already begun, and I have made up my mind not to join this melee. But when I heard Pavatapel shouting to Draco to shut up, I couldn't help it anymore. I forgot that I wouldn't interfere in anything about Draco, and I forgot that I was still angry with Draco. I immediately counterattacked and succeeded in making it impossible for Patil to refute. Daphne looked at me with a look of admiration, while Moshi looked around anxiously. Draco did not express gratitude for my help. I am like a loyal knight who has not received the proper reward. Draco's lack of any reaction is enough to prove that I am just a replaceable friend. I have received my signal, and all my anger has suddenly subsided. I am powerless to admit that Audrey is right. I held my arms and watched the pranks that only belonged to Draco quietly. The complex emotions in my heart made it difficult for me, who was still young at the time, to digest. Draco directed all his attention towards the memory ball he wanted in the morning, while other Slytherin students cheered as Draco rode a broomstick into the sky. He suspended at a height parallel to an oak tree, provoking Harry Potter. Harry Potter quickly fell for it. He rode a flying broomstick but could fly to the same height as Draco. At this moment, the screams and cheers for Draco were immediately overwhelmed by the students of Gryffindor College. The sky no longer belongs to Draco alone. Harry Potter seems to have a natural understanding of how to fly. His broom shoots at Draco like a javelin and then suddenly turns around. He accelerates his dive to catch the glass ball and lands smoothly. His performance is even more exciting than every time Draco tells Quidditch. Draco also noticed this, especially with the disappointed expression on Slytherin's other students, who frowned with anger in their eyes. But Professor McGonagall suddenly appeared and, with an angry tone, whirled away Harry Potter, immediately reversing Draco's unfavorable situation. Joel bet that Harry Potter would be dropped out of school, and Clab agreed. Draco showed a proud smile. The schadenfreude of Slytherin students and Gryffindor's worries continued until dinner in the auditorium at night. Draco was in a good mood and leaned over to me, propping his head on his arm. He pretended to be casual and said, "I have a duel with Harry Potter at midnight." I focused on eating the pie on the plate, as if the blueberry filling in front of me caught my attention more. I whispered, "Are you sure Harry Potter will really drop out of school? I heard my dad say that Professor McGonagall once took someone away and fired him, and today everyone saw Harry Potter being taken away by Professor McGonagall," Goyle said loudly while chewing a chicken leg in his hand. It seemed that in order to enhance his persuasiveness, he looked around and skipped over Theodore, who was drinking soup with his head down. He examined Crabbe, who was gnawing on chicken legs like him, and finally landed on Bresson, seeking approval with eager eyes, as if waiting for him to say, "Yes, I quite agree with what Gore said." Zabini narrowed his narrow eyes and curled his mouth to say something that met Gore's expectations, but the following sentence left Gore speechless, but his expression instead seemed to have been praised, "Gore." Although he spoke to Gore, his eyes looked straight at Draco. "Harry Potter is not as foolish as we imagine. Look at his performance in flying classes, don't forget that he defeated the most powerful wizard at birth, Theodore said seriously. It seemed like recalling his own embarrassment during the flying class. Draco's smile couldn't be sustained, his eyes were full of fear, and he didn't want anyone to see it, so he pretended to be calm and said, "He's just lucky. My broom is so broken that I can't fly higher." "My broom is also very broken," Clab added as he paused to eat. "Pansy, why are you suddenly so fond of eating blueberry pies?" Draco didn't continue the discussion around the flying class, he urgently wanted to change the topic, as long as he didn't talk about any topics related to Harry Potter. The pie was too dry and the blueberry sauce was a bit stale, but I still frowned and took the last bite without commenting on his words. "Perhaps you should pay more attention to the midnight duel than my pie." When I left the auditorium, I seemed to catch a glimpse of Draco's surprised expression, but my mood inexplicably improved. Chapter 9. Ball. You are listening at novelfull.audio. De co lois ara trong quatrin lay text. Chapter 10. Crazy Cry Therapy. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Catherine walked into my dormitory vigorously, holding several heavy books and wearing high heels. Before I could open my mouth, Catherine eagerly pointed to the books covering the entire bed and began introducing various details of Hogwarts hosting the ball. "So, do I have to finish reading everything?" I said with a bitter face. "Of course, this is the first time a dance party has been held without a prefect presiding over it. It must be done well, otherwise." Catherine's tone suddenly paused, her brown eyebrows raised high, as if she was lost in some important thought. "Catherine." Her silence made me feel uneasy, and I whispered her name with a worried expression on my face. Suddenly, her eyes fixed on me, the corners of her mouth tightly pursed, and her originally thin lips became tough and serious due to the force she exerted on her soft and beautiful face. For a moment, I felt like the person standing in front of me was the cold and annoying Prefect Corinne. I saw her walking around the end of the bed, gradually approaching me, and then sitting face to face with me only a fist away. I finally realized that those gentle light blue eyes were actually cold gray, with a silver metallic coldness and a deep gray hidden deep in the sea. I felt a bit uncomfortable and my body distanced itself from Catherine, forcing a smile. "What's wrong with you?" "It feels so strange," I said. "Do you really want to hold this ball?" Her tone did not show any hesitation, but rather a tone of forced command, her eyes slightly narrowed, with consideration and scrutiny. "Have you ever thought about what consequences you will bear when Snow Pear finds out? You may face resentment and rejection from the entire Slytherin community, and in the future, you may also face anger from the prefect. Are you sure you can handle it yourself?" A series of questions were like shells hitting me, until she paused in her tone, as if muttering to herself, perhaps, this was already a mistake. I was completely angered by her distrust, and suddenly stood up like a giant monster, rudely starting to shout, "You have offended me. You are too arrogant. Since you don't believe I will do this dance well, why did you deceive me? Why did I come to Hogwarts? Audrey is right, I'm too foolish. There's nothing here. They don't even care about me. I'm like a clown." All my unpleasantness and accumulated negative emotions erupted without warning, and Catherine's questioning of me was like sporadic sparks drilling into a warm and dry pile of weeds. Suddenly, it ignited my dissatisfaction with Hogwarts, disappointment at not meeting my expectations, and sadness at Draco's indifference. I cried loudly and choked, unaware that the bow on my hair had been removed. But unfortunately, this kind of breakdown crying made my mood inexplicably much better. I cried so hard that I almost forgot what I was crying for. Crying simply for the sake of crying made the dissatisfaction I had accumulated since enrollment less important. This kind of joyful crying made me forget that I should maintain a lady's posture, forget that there were unfamiliar people around me watching my loss of composure, and I cried hard. Later on, I began to forget why I cried. The so-called inability to hold a ball is not as important, and the once eerie desire for a ball seems to have disappeared. Catherine didn't know what I was thinking that I was sad and upset because I couldn't hold the ball, but it seemed that she didn't expect my reaction to be so intense. Fortunately, she did not mock or ridicule, and her elegant posture with good manners allowed her to choose the safest and most conservative way of comfort. Sitting quietly on the side. Until I cried a little tired, lifted my head and rubbed my sour eyes, looking at Catherine with embarrassment, and said awkwardly, "Actually, I've been a bit unhappy lately. It's much better now. If you don't want me to have a ball, I won't mind. Of course you want to hold this ball. No one is more suitable than you." Catherine's eyes flickered and her tone was a bit excited. "Then I won't worry about the consequences." "What consequences?" Crying for too long made my mind a bit confused, and I didn't have time to think about Catherine's meaning. It's just strange that she became even more determined after my crying. Catherine didn't answer and turned to carefully read the books she had brought with her, as if she had made a decision. Finally, she turned her head and said solemnly, "You can skip reading these books. You are fully responsible for this dance. Calm down, this is just an ordinary dance." "Yes, it's just an ordinary ball." Catherine seemed to have some thoughts on it. Her beautiful face showed a gentle smile, and her gray eyes turned gentle blue, as if the tough one she had just been was my illusion. She had become the familiar Catherine to me again. I don't know why her attitude changed so quickly, but hearing Catherine's reaffirmation of me also made me decide to make sure the ball was held well. "As long as the ball is held after Christmas, it's okay," she added. "Why can't it be held before Christmas?" I frowned and asked. "It's best to hold it next month. Just thinking about the end of the semester after Christmas, it's really boring to have a dance party after the end of the semester," I thought to myself. Catherine looked incredulously at Merlin's beard and said, "There's no dance party that can resist the crazy Quidditch. No wonder you hate Hogwarts and don't even know when Quidditch will be held." "Okay," I waved my hand reluctantly, "that's after Christmas, right?" "Alright, I should go back now. Tomorrow morning, you should go to the 3rd grade table for breakfast. There are a few senior students that you should also know." Catherine stood up with a smile, swinging a cleaning spell with her cane, as if realizing that I needed it more. She looked at my embarrassed appearance and chuckled politely, directly casting a cleaning spell on me. Catherine's reaction made me feel a bit flustered. I wished I could immediately look in front of the mirror and see clearly. However, I thought of the crying that I had just burst into tears, and a hint of shyness appeared on my face. "Catherine, what happened just now?" I said awkwardly, my eyes embarrassed to look at Catherine. "I won't say it," Catherine chuckled mischievously. Upon hearing her promise, I was completely relieved. I immediately jumped up and stood in front of the mirror, carefully examining my red eyes, thinking about what spell could be dispelled. Suddenly, I heard Catherine calling out my name and turned back strangely. "Pansy, you'll like Hogwarts," Catherine stood at the door and said with a determined tone. The flickering candlelight made me a bit unable to see her expression clearly, and her eyes were still tingling slightly. I gave up stretching my neck and looked forward, wanting to know how red my eyes were and wishing to end the conversation quickly. "I hope so," I smiled perfunctorily, not taking Catherine's words to heart at all, except that I needed something to divert my attention, such as this ball.